Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have just a great show for you today. I can't wait to discuss it. We're going to be doing something interesting technologically behind the scenes that we're not even going to tell you about.
Yeah, we'll tell you about it later.
Quite an experiment.
So later on Rising, I'll be talking about pushback from Robert F. Kennedy is getting over a shooting at CDC headquarters.
Plus, we will also discuss how the Epstein saga seems to be becoming less and less of a political liability for Republicans.
And Gavin Newsom is issuing a warning to President Trump if he doesn't retreat on his gerrymandering attack. But first, Robbie, what is on your radar?
Let's get to it. All right, here we go. Now, send in the troops. That's President Donald Trump's plan to reduce violent crime in the nation's capital. The president made the announcement yesterday that he would be implementing a 30-day takeover of Washington, D.C.'s police department and then supplementing their effort with 800 National Guard troops. Here was part of Trump's announcement.
The murder rate in Washington today is higher than that of Bogota, Colombia, Mexico City, some of the places that you hear about as being the worst places on earth, much higher. This is much higher. The number of car thefts has doubled over the past 5 years, and the number of carjackings has more than tripled. Murders in 2023 reached the highest rate probably ever. They say 25 years, but they don't know what that means because it just goes back 25 years. Can't be worse.
In response, Democrats, liberal pundits, and the mainstream media reacted with fury that someone would try to actually address D.C.'s crime problems. The responses ranged from anger over the federal takeover to denial that there's even a problem at all to desperate attempts to talk about something else. Seriously, the national reporters at the press conference swiftly pivoted to questions about Russia-Ukraine, which is the only subject that holds the mainstream media's interest for more than a few seconds. Now, my favorite response was from CNN's Dana Bash, who took the opportunity to remind her viewers about January 6th.
The most violent moment in recent history in D.C. was January 6th. And it was an attack on the United States Capitol by a lot of people who were doing it in the name of Donald Trump. And it included, the people who were hurt included members of law enforcement.
Okay, look, January 6th was in fact very bad. It's bad when protesters fight with cops, and it's bad when they smash windows, something left-wing protesters did in D.C. throughout the summer of 2020, But most violent moment in recent history, what does that even mean? Here are the actual facts. Violence in Washington, D.C. spiked massively as a result of the pandemic, reversing a trend of greatly declining violence since the mid-1990s. D.C. saw an unprecedented wave of carjackings and more murders in 2023 than any previous year on record. Now look, it's also true that violence has declined since then, and that's great. It should be recognized and celebrated, with the caveat that a D.C. police commander was suspended for falsifying crime data a few months back. What's really going on, in my opinion, is that three basic realities about crime and disorder in D.C. are being conflated. First, D.C. has plenty of gang-related violence that is not random. The victims of these killings, which are usually shootings, are typically other gang members. Disproportionately, this violence takes place in poorer and historically unsafe neighborhoods. This is the same kind of crime that many large cities struggle with, from Chicago to Detroit to Philadelphia to Baltimore and so on. The way to address it is to investigate and solve more murder cases by giving homicide detectives more resources, and then actually prosecuting unlawful firearm possessions. We have to take away guns not from law-abiding citizens, but from individuals who are already disqualified from having weapons due to prior convictions. Any city that does that will substantially reduce its violent crime problem. Now, the second issue is mentally ill drug addicts occupying public spaces and setting up tent cities. This peaked during the pandemic itself, when vagrants turned Union Station, one of D.C.'s most beautiful spaces, into a shanty town for addicts. Note that this isn't actually the city government's fault. Federal property, like the green space in front of the train station, is actually managed by the feds, who were just not doing a very good job during the pandemic. Thankfully, those tent cities are now mostly gone. The third issue, and by some measures the most concerning, in my opinion, since it's quite new and novel, there are informal gangs, bands of teenagers entering more affluent, theoretically safer areas of the city and engaging in violence and vandalism, muggings, carjackings, etc. This category of crime is what has prompted Trump's decision to take over the police response. A 19-year-old former employee of DOJ was attacked over the weekend by a group of unruly teens. Now, as a citizen of Washington, D.C., this is the sort of thing I'm most worried about. I've seen it in my own neighborhood this summer, which prompted the area of D.C. I live in to start enforcing curfews for teenagers. Anecdotally, a more robust police presence has deterred this kind of crime, at least somewhat, where I live. Now, as Trump grapples with these waves of carjacking teenagers, I'd say that the main thing is for the police to just be more available. I don't want to turn D.C. into some kind of authoritarian surveillance state where every kid is stopped when he gets off the metro. But more law enforcement officers on our streets monitoring the situation will mean a reduction in crimes of opportunity. And as for all the CNN liberals screaming about Trump's decision, they may be complaining about it on your televisions, but they certainly aren't complaining about it in private. On the contrary, it's readily apparent to most people who live in D.C., Democrats and Republicans, that something has gone very wrong in the nation's capital.
I think the conversation is that
you're moving here, so you have an interesting perspective. You've seen, to heck with it, I'm coming here.
I've lived in North Philadelphia too, because I went to college at Temple, and I think it's all relative, right? When we talk about the numbers of actually things happening, there are cases to be argued in places like Philadelphia where the crime rate was the highest in the country. DC is not even on the top 10 list of where the most crimes are happening in recent history, okay? And that's the biggest problem here, is that President Trump is referring to this as a state of emergency, which is allowing him to use the jurisdiction that he's using to bring in federal authorities like the National Guard. But then the contradiction in which Dana Bash was talking about with January 6th is that there was a long hesitation to bring in the National Guard for people that were also hurting police officers and doing things that were against the law.
Well,
and so I think that
Republicans blame Nancy Pelosi for that because the chief of police has said he asked for a federal response and she turned him down.
Okay, so the buck doesn't
that's
stop.
not on Trump.
The buck doesn't stop with the president all of a sudden. The buck stops with Nancy Pelosi. Fine, if that's your argument. But either way, when Trump's
that's not my argument. That's the police chief's argument.
When Trump's always saying the buck stops with Biden, now I would say he has to wear the hat sometimes. And so that's the biggest thing, is that we're disproportionately acting like D.C. is in any situation that big cities aren't in. Like, the top crime is happening in Memphis. This is a Republican-led state and a city that you should look at then if President Trump wants to get involved. Also very concerning about his extremely long press conference yesterday was the fact that he said he wants to go into other cities like Baltimore, where crime is down, like New York City. And nobody asked for that. And so that also will require congressional approval. And also, it's not the same as D.C. D.C. is this anomaly where he can actually come and do what he's doing. But after 30 days, he has to have a longer conversation with Congress. So unless he wants the people to litigate this endlessly, why not engage with Muriel Bowser and figure out how she wants to move forward? Why not make an announcement that she's caught off guard by? I mean, now she has to talk. It's like you're playing chess and just cheat in the game. She didn't say she's against it.
She did not say she's against it. I think she welcomes the help.
Yeah, but Republican standpoint is to allow states in municipalities to govern themselves. And so the fact that he didn't allow a conversation to happen prior to making some major announcement about what federal authorities is going to do should be against all things. Like you said, you don't want an authoritarian state. You just want to be safe. I think that that's a basic thing for anybody who lives in D.C., Democrat or Republican. That's fine. But the problem is the federal overstep and the overreach right now that wasn't necessary. The moment didn't call for an emergency. It didn't call for an emergency.
It feels, again, I've lived here continuously for the last 10 years and on and off for the 5 years before that, and it feels markedly unsafer here. Now,
I can't go off feelings. I have to go off numbers.
Feelings are not the truth.
Homicide is down 12%.
Yes, up from a anomalous high 2 years ago. But the key difference, I think, this is the only way I can square it. Yes, I believe the statistics. Yes, the violence is down, and that's good. But the violence used to be constrained, frankly. I mean, maybe this is not a good thing, but to areas of the city that are in disrepair, that are disproportionately poor. And that's awful for those people, and we should have been doing more to help them all along. But now people who don't live there are dealing with more violence. Because, again, we're dealing with bands of teenagers between the ages of 14 and 20 who are attacking people at random, stealing cars, way more crimes of opportunity. Not just, it's gangs shooting other gangs, predominantly shooting other criminals. Again, I'm not saying, oh no, that's fine then, people dying is people dying, but now people who are not in the game of crime are being victimized at much higher rates. That's what I think the statistics are not exactly showing.
There's so much for me to unpack here, but I know we're going to be talking about it probably as long as its presence exists in D.C., so we'll have plenty of opportunity to keep talking about this. President Trump is set to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin later this week. The warning from Ukraine coming up. We'll be right back.
The worst thing that's happened, by far the worst that's happened since World War II. So I'm going in to speak to Vladimir Putin. And I'm going to be telling him, you got to end this war. You got to end it. We're going to have a meeting with Vladimir Putin. And at the end of that meeting, probably in the first 2 minutes, I'll know exactly whether or not a deal can be made.
How will you know that?
Because that's what I do. I make deals.
That was President Trump yesterday previewing his summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin later this week.
While the two world leaders are still working to finalize the details of the summit, Trump admitted it would take further meetings to reach a peace deal and said his ultimate goal is to put Putin and Zelensky in a room to put an end to the war, even if it means Ukraine giving up territory.
Now, ceding land is a line that President Zelensky has consistently said he would not cross, saying in a video last week that Russia must not be rewarded for their aggression, and warned yesterday that Putin's goal with the summit is to deceive Trump. So this is...
I don't deceive Trump. Look, they got to negotiate. They got to get together. They got to meet. They got to discuss.
Who's they? Because it should be Zelensky and Putin, not Zelensky.
Yeah, and Trump is helping to facilitate to eventually get them in the room together. I think it's great.
By not inviting Zelensky to the meeting and telling him what happens first. He said, actually, I'm going to call European allies. And then, oh, wait, no, out of respect for Zelensky, I'll call him first. Like, hello? This is the number one person that needs to be in the conversation out of anyone.
Did you see what Trump accomplished with Azerbaijan and Armenia last week? It was an amazing, historic peace summit. Our president should win the Nobel Peace Prize because of it. And now that was the warm-up round. And now we're going to see if we can do the real thing with Russia and Ukraine. And it's hard because of the situation Biden has left him in, but he's doing his best.
Okay, this is about to be, I think, the 5th time that now Putin has met with Trump on the phone or in person now, where they're going to Alaska. And he's consistently been playing games and playing in Trump's face. And Trump... He's on record saying multiple times, I think I watched a series of him like, well, I'm let down by Putin's action. Well, I'm let down. Okay, it's 7 months later. Putin is playing the same game he's been playing. You're the only one who's just noticing that you were part of the game. And so to go on terms that Putin likes, while at the same time criticizing Zelensky, which he was doing, he said, you know, I can't believe, or let me actually say exactly. He said he very, very severely disagrees with Zelensky for not ceding land. It's not Trump's decision to make. And so that's the thing. If you don't have Zelensky at the table, how can you make these firm stances publicly for the rest of the world to watch? Like, why don't you see what Europe, our allies, and what Zelensky wants? Why don't you have a conversation with them first before you go meet with Russia?
Well, we know what they want. We want Ukraine not to be conquered by Russia. Unfortunately, that's what's going to happen if we do nothing, if there's no negotiations. Russia will win. That's why it's hard to bring Russia to the negotiating table, hard to get them to give up this effort, because they're going to win this war. They're going to conquer all of Ukraine. To prevent them from doing that, we need to do some level of uncomfortable giving up territory. It's not going to be great. Trump actually talked about an exchange of territory. I think if there's an exchange of territory, that would be a rousing success. If Russia gets something and Ukraine gets something, I doubt that's very much that's going to happen.
But Zelensky said he's not interested. And also, you know, President Trump...
Then, I mean, he's going to be not interested.
That's not the only solution, though. That's not the only solution. The solution also can be to continue to stand firm on what President Trump just said publicly. If Russia doesn't come to the table in X amount of days, I'm going to do this. Like, okay, so follow through with the plan, because Russia does not. I keep saying the same thing. Russia doesn't want to get into a war with the U.S. The U.S. doesn't want to get into a war with Russia. So let's just remove that off the table, because we're likely, extremely likely. I want to say, I need to knock on wood. We're not going to get into a nuclear war, right?
Of course not.
Okay, so then. Oil
not
revenue.
For Ukraine.
Yeah, oil revenues are shrinking. Inflation is high. These are all situations that Russia is dealing with. And so the more that the U.S. pushes pressure, yeah, people are dying on their end too. The more that we put pressure, you create like a stalemate where they actually have to come to the table with a reasonable request. Not, I'll take everything. Not, I'll take everything.
They are willing to put up with, look what they've already been willing to put up with. Look what they've been willing to put up with in past conflicts, from World War II to Napoleon. Like, they are willing to lose people. It's an authoritarian state. Vladimir Putin is willing to sacrifice thousands and thousands and thousands of his own people, which is very sad and unfortunate, but is a reality we have to deal with. If sanctions worked, if that kind of economic pressure worked, we'd have a lot more favorable regime change around the globe. We couldn't even dislodge Castro over 50 or 60 years. I just don't have a lot of faith in that. I don't. It doesn't have a good track record. We already tried that. It didn't work. They just absorbed the cost of it. And Europe is still engaged in the taking their Russian energy.
I don't think we should reward authoritarians. We shouldn't just say, yes, no problem. You went too far. You showed us that you're not going to stop. Let's bow down. And let's also say it publicly before we have conversations with Zelensky.
We're not saying bow down. We're saying, well, let's
Well, Trump said multiple times, yeah, we're going to share land. He's making firm decisions, basically saying things on behalf of Zelensky doesn't agree with. So how can you come to the table and call yourself a great deal maker when you're talking to the aggressor? The person that is actually the victim place in all of this is constantly just sitting there like feeling baffled because you're berating them nationally or internationally on television, and as well as not even seeing what they would like out of the situation.
Have you ever seen the movie No Country for Old Men? It's one of my favorite movies. Coen Brothers, fantastic, based on the Cormac McCarthy novel. So good. And the bad guy, Anton Chigurh, played by Javier Bardem, he's this psychopathic killer who's hunting the main character, Josh Brolin, for a variety of reasons. Josh Brolin annoys him. And so then he says to Josh Brolin's character, I won't, this is the best deal you're going to get. I won't pretend that you can save your own life because I'm still going to kill you no matter what. But if you stop trying to resist me, if you just give me what I want, I am going to kill you, but I won't go kill your wife as well. That's the deal he offers him. He says, that's the best deal you're going to get. Josh Brolin doesn't take that deal, and so he gets both of them killed, probably. It's a little ambiguous what happens at the end. That's anomalous to the situation.
That's your movie
example. We can get everybody killed, or we can just have somebody killed.
Let's go to the rest of the movies in the history of movies. Okay, then they usually end a little differently. Like the bad guy does not come out as the victor. Let's take Superman or Batman, right? That's not how this works.
Life.
Okay, I'm just telling you, that movie is not real life either. I don't think that's how we should go. The U.S. has a superiority here to be like the superpower to say, no, we're not going to accept this. We don't think you're going down the right path. Our allies feel uncomfortable with Russia moving into Ukraine territory. It makes them more vulnerable. We should be considerate, especially with people that are in NATO, that we don't want our allies feeling extremely uncomfortable, because then we would be involved in a serious conflict if Russia does decide to continue to expand. What will stop a dictator from continuing forward? Nothing. Because if they just want to be the aggressor again, we're going to have to say, oh, and they might come on the cusp of any NATO territory and go as far as they want to until they touch NATO and maybe just stop. And we should just completely be not concerned and just allow it to happen.
We can't, if they really want to do that, there isn't anything we can do. When they get to NATO, then we are committed on paper to actually fighting them with ground troops and having an all-out war, which they know, which is why they're not going to infringe on NATO territory. They're mucking around in an area that we are not committed to defend. That was a huge mistake. Not saying ahead of time either we could have made Ukraine a part of NATO.
I agree with that.
Or we could have been clear that Ukraine is never going to be in NATO, and then Russia would ostensibly have had less of a reason for invading in the first place. Leaving it in this ambiguous status was a huge mistake that we're paying for now. But I think the best deal we can get for Ukraine is what Trump is working on, and I think it's maybe not going to be a very good deal.
We'll see how next week goes when he comes out. I'm so let down by Putin once again for the 6th time. We'll see how that goes. Next up, Governor Gavin Newsom is issuing a warning. That warning is to President Trump and Republicans over their gerrymandering threats. Don't go anywhere.
California Governor Gavin Newsom once again butting heads with Trump and also Republicans.
But this time, he's vowing to wield gerrymandering in his state to neutralize any seats Republicans may gain in the House due to Texas' controversial redistricting efforts. Let's take a look.
Hey, President Trump, it's time to stand down. It's time to make another phone call to Greg Abbott. This time, instead of calling him and telling him you're, quote unquote, entitled to 5 congressional seats, it's time to tell him to stand down. If you don't, California will neutralize anything you do in the state of Texas. California will continue to punch above its weight. We're not going to sit back and watch you light democracy on fire. We will fight fire with fire.
Newsom posting that video to social media Monday as Texas Democratic lawmakers are now in their 9th day of self-imposed exile in order to deny the legislature a chance to vote on the new maps.
Newsom's threat wasn't taken well on the right. Here's Texas Governor Greg Abbott's response on CNN last night.
All those big blue states, they've already gerrymandered. They got nothing left with regard to what they can do. And know this, if California tries to gerrymander 5 more districts, listen, Texas has the ability to eliminate 10 Democrats in our state. We can play that game more than they can because they have fewer Republican districts in their states.
But, okay, this is the problem. The American people don't want to be part of this game. They literally want the census to work how it was made to work. And so this whole gerrymandering back and forth, even though historically I know it's happened on both sides, I don't agree with it on either side. I think it should follow the rules of the census, which is intentionally, or Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which is that if states grow and have communities of color and things like that, then the representation should grow as well, and the maps should reflect that. Like, these are the points of the census. I mean, that's the point. Every 10 years we have a system. And I actually appreciate that Democrats, who are long criticized for not doing anything but sitting back and complaining, are actually doing something. I don't agree that this issue in gerrymandering is the one that I would prefer, but there still is something being done. They're not just sitting back and taking it to a vote in Texas and allowing it. And then other Democrats across the country are stepping up like, okay, if you want to break the rules, we'll break the rules. And I know it's technically not breaking the rules, but it's not representing the American people in the way that we want these maps to represent people. And there's multiple examples of, undercounting in the census, overcounting. And so it's not perfect, but it also doesn't require a political affiliation to say, oh, we need some more seats, we need some more votes. Come on, let's just change it because this works in our favor. I don't like it.
Democrats and Republicans gerrymander their districts like crazy because, and what's interesting about this is both parties have an incentive to have gerrymandered districts, and they almost want to let, like, okay, you're a red state, so that's fine. We're going to token opposition to what you're doing, but we do it too in our blue state. And what's so interesting is they just want to have safe districts for each other. So, like, they don't want a competitive district because they don't want to, like, both sides want, instead of having 5 districts where each are evenly split and Republicans and Democrats, like, either side could win and they actually have to campaign, they'd rather just have, even in the red leaning state, the Democrats say, okay, yeah, take your 3 or your 4 and we'll have our 1 and our 1 safe for me and your 4 are safe. They'd rather have it this way than have them all even so that they have to fight in each one of them. So there's just huge incentive to like make this thing in a way that is not favorable from democratic accountability standpoint. I don't know how you fix it, and it's like a disaster. You're never going to get buy-in from the two parties to fix it. So this is kind of one of those problems where I'm like, there is no reasonable solution, because the people who would have to sit down and look at this and say, we're doing this a bad way, but it advantages them to do it like this, and both sides. So, and
I think people are just expecting more. This is literally what ignited the MAGA base, right? People are expecting more from, or actually not even more, something different than what has historically existed from new leaderships. People are arguing for Democrats to bring in young voices, new ideas. What I just watched between Newsom and the governor Abbott, that's ridiculous to see 2 leaders get on screen and say, well, I'm going to do this. They felt like grade school. And so that's the point that's disheartening and just completely ineffective when there's real people who feel underrepresented across the country. There's real data that shows that, districts have grown in size. Like Texas has grown its population of Black and Latino people extreme levels, but none of the maps have reflected that in any way. And so I think that is a conversation and it's not going to stop. And I think real people are affected by these games that they're playing. Well, after the deadly CDC shooting, employees are reportedly turning their anger toward RFK Jr. I'll talk about it next in my lens. Stick around.
All right, some exciting news today before we get to your lens, Lindsey. This is pretty cool. The Hill has officially announced Granger, Lindsey, as the full-time co-host of Rising, effective today. This is pretty historic because I've been doing Rising now for over 4 years, and in that entire time, I've been, for most of it, a full-time employee of The Hill, like the guy who does Rising, and the other host has just been on a per-day basis. Some of them we had for a long time, some of them for a short time, but this is the first time I've had an official co-host the whole time. So I'm excited, and it's great.
I remember when I was deciding about taking the position, because you guys know I've been back and forth to Denver. I asked you if you wanted me to come, and you were like, yeah, like very excitedly, almost as excited as when Colin and I were having a baby, and I'm like, are you excited? He said, yeah. So I feel like you and I have a natural chemistry that's okay to, I want to show people that we can debate, but we're also probably going to end up on 14th Street going out together.
I do like to have fun with my co-hosts. The viewers know that. All right.
I'm so excited to be with you, so thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. I always love listening to what you have to say, including on this subject. I know we're going to have some spicy discussion about it. Tell us what's on your lens.
Yes, so something that you love to talk about is vaccines, so let's talk about it. Basically, conspiracy theories aren't just internet rabbit holes anymore. They've become gasoline on a fire that's burning in real life, and unfortunately, the flames are reaching places I think they never should touch. In politics today, conspiracy theories are currency. They often inspire, animate, and drive the party in this Trump era. And while it might be tempting to shrug them off as fringe nonsense with little real-world consequence, reality just keeps proving us otherwise. Case in point, a Georgia man recently opened fire on the CDC headquarters in Atlanta, killing a police officer and rattling the nation's top public health agency. According to the Associated Press, the shooter blamed the COVID-19 vaccine for making him depressed and suicidal. This wasn't some random act of violence. It was a direct line from misinformation to tragedy. Here's the truth. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who oversees the CDC as the Health and Human Services Secretary, has spent years vilifying the very institution he's now in charge of. He's compared the agency's vaccine work to, quote, fascism and, quote, child abuse, called it a, quote, cesspool of corruption, and once even likened the health decisions to, quote, the Holocaust, a comparison he later did apologize for. Now, after the shooting, the CDC's new director, Susan Monterez, reportedly convened an all-hands-on-deck online meeting of the agency's division that focuses on vaccines. Now, recordings of this meeting were reviewed by MSNBC. As the leader spoke, dozens of staffers reportedly posted messages in the meeting chat, many naming Kennedy, citing his years of spreading misinformation about vaccines and vilifying the health agencies that he now leads. Staff members described the feeling like, quote, sitting ducks. And one reportedly said, quote, we need to stop fanning the flames of hatred against us, stop spreading misinformation. We will not be safe until their attacks against us stop. And yet, as bullets still echoed in the minds of the CDC workers, Kennedy's most visible public activity was posting fishing photos in Alaska this weekend. His official statement of support came more than 30 minutes after those fishing photos and long after the symbolism had sunk in. As infectious disease specialist Celine Gounder put it, quote, the symbolism could not be clearer. Scientists, doctors, public health officials, and law enforcement officials, people whose life's work is to protect the nation, now have a target on their backs. If Kennedy truly believes in protecting Americans' health, now is the moment to lower the temperature. The rhetoric he's used in the past might score political points, yeah, but it should be clear that it's no longer acceptable. Conspiracy theories are not harmless. They have consequences, and this time, one of those consequences was deadly. Yes, people are solely responsible, meaning the shooter is solely responsible for his terrible actions. But leadership can make it a point not to allow conspiracy theories to run wild. Kennedy can't undo years of inflammatory comments overnight, but he can start by speaking responsibly now, because when words become bullets, the damage is already done.
Oh boy, we are going to fight about this. Obviously, anyone taking matters into their own hands, using violence for any reason, attacking government buildings or government workers is wrong and bad and should be prosecuted to the fullest extent. But I think it's very wrong to blame RFK Jr. or anyone else for his actions, just as it's not, I mean, mainstream liberal people love to do this when the violence was plausibly motivated by some right-wing cause, and then Republicans like to do this when the violence was plausibly motivated by some left-wing cause, and we just can play this game till the end of time. But I guess to your bigger point about the spreading of conspiracy theories. So I do think the CDC should be shut down. I think it's an appallingly evil organization.
The words you're using.
Theories
RFK constantly spread conspiracy theories, not only around COVID, but around vaccines causing autism. That's untrue, not proven by any direct correlation. He's also claimed that Anthony Fauci and Bill Gates exaggerated the pandemic to promote vaccines. Did they have that direct link? He's telling people that. So people now hate Anthony Fauci. People now hate the entire industry because they decided to get the vaccine based on guidance that people at the time thought it was
plausibly the cause of the pandemic in the first place, because he was advocate for doing dangerous scientific research in Wuhan, China, that our own Energy Department, CIA, and FBI think was its likely cause.
He claimed that the FDA suppresses advancements in health. These are all things that have come out of RFK's mouth. I'm reading quotes. He said that the real in his book called The Real Anthony Fauci, he said a historic coup d'etat against Western democracy is what Anthony Fauci has done. So, like, imagine if you are affected by this. Imagine if
how is that a conspiracy? What you just said?
Because Anthony Fauci didn't plan to take over the world and kill people. That's not actually going to ever be a correlation.
I don't think he said Anthony Fauci planned to take over the world and kill people.
Well, he went into a lab, created this virus, virus and allowed people to die by giving wrong information, and knew that vaccines may have some negative side effects, which I think people did their best, right? They had shortcomings, of course, but to blame an entire organization full of employees that are working extremely hard to figure out solutions.
They were wrong. They got the testing wrong. There has to be accountability.
I know, but they're wholly uncomfortable. They're wholly uncomfortable working. So you don't think there's some people in there that got it right? Just to point out the negatives, like it's pretty hard to come up with vaccines and all the solutions that are going to solve a worldwide pandemic. And so it's really...
Well, now you want to have it both ways. You want to say that we shouldn't criticize them, or
no, we should criticize them.
Okay,
but
that's what he's doing.
But we shouldn't have the rhetoric go so far from the highest officials that people feel uncomfortable doing their job. They feel like there's a target on their back.
Did their rhetoric not go too far? Their rhetoric, they accused him and others of being serial spreaders of misinformation and getting people killed, and then
that's misinformation.
The things they were saying about them were untrue because the early claims that the health officials made about the efficacy of the COVID vaccine itself were overstated and were exaggerated. Their claims that if you had to get this vaccine to protect other people to lower the transmission, that's what they said. And then what it turned out is that it maybe has some protective effect.
Right, so then that's what it does. My point. So when you take any medicine, if you take any medicine, Advil, does it cure every headache? No. Some people are still going to have a headache after they take it, right? That's what I'm saying. They literally gave a solution to a worldwide pandemic, and people were not satisfied with it, and they adjusted as they went on and learned more information.
The vaccine
and people want to
does not
blame
make
them
a
forever.
meaningful difference
Yes,
on
it
your
does make a
COVID
meaningful
outcome
difference.
for
People's
otherwise
lives
healthy
were
people.
saved. People saved their grandparents by
Well,
having the vaccine.
What's
No,
your
I think people were healthier because they got it. People were actually walking around free.
People were healthier.
Yeah, they actually were able to walk around more.
Evidence that
there's no scientific evidence that it
healthy.
had no influence at all.
I didn't say that. No,
you said it was ineffective. It was overstated.
People.
I think that people took it and protected their other family members, and that was a good thing to do, right? If you are around younger people, yes, because people are the most vulnerable, are older people.
But there's no
and
evidence
people
that
with
it prevented
pre-existing
transmission.
But if you're around older people and you have a less likelihood of having negative side effects and passing it on, right? Say you're extremely sick. You're not going to get your grandma extremely sick, right? If you're wearing the mask and doing all things. Okay, but we don't have scientific... If we don't have scientific...
What they said was wear a mask, any mask, and you'll protect people around you, and now they admit
you
that
were
was
referred
wrong.
to do nothing and just pass the virus to everybody? Like, that was a ridiculous time. Go back and jog your memory about how uncomfortable we were.
My claims have been very clear. Getting the vaccine is a good protective choice for people who are unhealthy or elderly. For everyone else, it doesn't matter. That is what the science has borne out, and that is not what the health officials said. Next up, are people still interested in knowing more about the Epstein case, and has it harmed President Trump's approval ratings? We will talk about that next. Stay with us. The Epstein saga is becoming a political dud and a nothing burger, says CNN data guru Harry Enton. For instance, Google searches for Epstein-related information are down 89% from just 3 weeks ago. Here's Enton explaining the situation.
What am I talking about here?
Which is wild.
Which is wild.
This has been for 3 weeks.
Exactly. Now. Take a look here. Google searches for Epstein down 89% versus just 3 weeks ago. Falling through the floor. It is no longer the top term searched alongside Donald Trump's name. That's been trading off between Taros and Vladimir Putin, with obviously the meeting coming up later this week. But at this particular point, the American people's interest in this story, it's quickly becoming something of a nothing burger.
Enton also suggested that Trump's approval rating is still holding steady and Americans have lost interest in the Epstein case. Let's take a listen.
Trump's approval rating in July of 2025, it was 45%. It's still well within that margin of error here at 44%. And you compare that to where he was in his first term at this point. He was at 37%. So he's 7 points higher, very much in a different political universe now, significantly higher in terms of his overall approval rating than he was at this point in his first term. 0 respondents said that the Epstein case was the top issue. How about among independents? 0 independents said that. And among Republicans, and therefore overall, just a single one.
Meanwhile, a federal judge in New York rejected a request by the Justice Department to unseal grand jury transcripts from an investigation into Ghislaine Maxwell. The judge, Paul Engelmayer, wrote about his decision, quote, "It's an entire premise that the Maxwell grand jury materials would bring to light meaningful new information about Epstein and Maxwell's crimes or the government's investigation into them is demonstrably false." Engelmayer added the Justice Department was being, quote, "disingenuous in making that argument for disclosure." Justice Department, so why don't you release your documents that you have in your possession, like the Treasury Department documents, so we can follow the money. I don't care about a Google search. Obviously, this is not the #1 issue for Americans. Americans are trying to buy groceries for their family and children's. Like, like I am, trying to enjoy their life, trying to negotiate their rent like you are when it goes up an astronomical amount. There are way more or way bigger issues while we pan this out. But I doubt, and I disagree, especially from the same people that don't like to listen to polls. This is all Republicans arguing that all the polls about Hillary Clinton,
polls.
blah, blah, blah. No, I don't want to hear when the polls are convenient.
believe the polls.
No, and I don't want to hear about this, okay? Because I think people are still interested in it. I've watched enough podcasts to know. I've listened to Joe Rogan scream and say, this is his line in the sand. I believe that's a quote. Nobody's done with this except for you and a small part of the MAGA party that decided we have better fish to fry. Donald Trump has thrown so much pasta at the wall. Obviously, he really doesn't want us to focus here. And we are so blindly loyal that we're going to keep going forward. And for my last point, there's a Washington Post poll from just a week ago that 61% of Americans think that there's some, quote, embarrassing information about President Donald Trump inside of those Epstein files, and that's why he's not releasing them. So more than half of the country wants to know, well, what's going on here? Where there's smoke, there's fire. This is making us uncomfortable. Whether people jumped on the bandwagon late or were interested in this from the beginning, people should come forward because there's serious allegations here and involvement possibly by some of the people leading our country and beyond.
Let me ask you a question.
Please, I love a question.
Jeffrey who?
You're on the wrong side of history. This is crazy.
No, I'm on Trump's side, and that always ends up being the right side. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, he was right about this from the beginning. Lots of information had been released. His associates took things too far and overpromised and underdelivered, which is always a big political mistake. They have to have some accountability for that. In particular, Pam Bondi screwed up so massively. I don't even understand how she can possibly save face at this point, but we're moving on. There's not. What do they? We know Trump associated with Epstein. We know that already. There's nothing more to know. They had an association. Then they had a falling out over. Now we know it was Epstein actually stole his employee Virginia Giuffre, and then had the compromising sexual situation with her. Epstein did, not Trump. Epstein, and that's that.
Let me ask you a question.
Yes.
If you were to ask me, Lindsey, what did you do last night? And then I bring up a different topic. And then you ask me again tomorrow and I bring up another different topic. And then I bring up a completely egregious, dramatic topic. This is what happened in the last few weeks. So we had an entire Russiagate situation that you're going to talk about what no one cares about. No one cares about Obama going to jail because he's not. Right? That was a waste of our time.
Tulsi Gabbard. That the president ordered
no, that's
his
not true.
Tulsi Gabbard.
No, I think that he looked into something that he thought was not appropriate and did the research that was appropriate by a bipartisan committee. That's what I think. But also I think
Obama said, I don't like that Trump just won this legitimately.
Wait, Tulsi Gabbard barged into a press conference and said, oh, I have some breaking news. Guess what? No one's talking about that anymore. Look at the search history for that. I mean, it's like
talking about it on Fox and Newsmax, and
it's still not as relevant as it was when it was all over the place a week ago, right? It's not the new thing because you know what
I think
happened?
our viewers care. Our
Trump
videos on that have done very well.
Well, Trump found another big issue. It's D.C. It's when the Doge staffer was hurt, he decided, I'm going to jump on this D.C. crime issue. So he does so much look this way, look this way, look this way, that obviously people are going to start focusing on the latest news. That's what we do as people in this industry. That's what people do at home. That's what podcasters do. But at the end of the day, Epstein is an overarching issue that will stand the test of time, especially as these subpoenas happen and we start seeing people come before Congress. So I know that this is not going away, no matter how many times you say it out loud. Trump is really good at repeating things over and over again until they're accepted. But you know what? When you have other people holding them accountable, like a bipartisan group of people that want to see this through, I don't think that we're just going to let this go because I think people deserve answers to the questions they've been asking for more than a year.
Well, I mean, they deserve answers from the people who are proximate to Trump, who promised them something that they had no intention of giving. Yeah, I don't disagree that if you're really into this story and you were convinced by Dan Bongino or Kash Patel that there was some list of powerful people, probably Democrats from the right-wing perspective, who were involved with Epstein and that was hidden and you're about to get that, I see why you're upset. I mean, I understand why you're frustrated and feel misled by the administration if that's you, because they made it sound like there were all these powerful people who've been protected by the government, or why that was. I have questions still about Jeffrey Epstein's connections to intelligence. Ghislaine Maxwell, obviously through her father, had a connection to Israeli intelligence. That's true. I want to know more about that. I want to know more about how the deal came about for Epstein initially. I'm still interested in all those
How
subjects.
Epstein
but,
even got wealthy. We're like, where we want to understand that fully, right? How do you go?
Yeah,
from,
but he didn't get wealthy from sexual stuff.
Yeah, I know, but he could get wealthy by people paying him because he had something on them, right? So they invested into his company.
He was absurdly wealthy. That was
Yeah, but these all
he was a finance. I mean, it's weird, but
yeah, it's very weird. And you don't accept anything else weird. So that's what I'm saying. You're just like letting this one slide. And I just want to understand, like, you're that blindly allegiant to whatever Trump says that you're going to be like, okay, it's time to move on. That's to me ridiculous. You had a firm stance on this. You need to stand 2 feet planted in the ground in your firm stance. You cannot just abandon something that you talk so much about. You went on and on and on and on. You're leaving Joe Rogan hanging.
About it now.
So don't be surprised when Joe Rogan kind of quits the party and goes over to the next person that's, Bernie Sanders.
Look, I subsequently learned more from
you're leaving him hanging.
No, I'll tell you exactly why. It's not just that I do whatever Trump. Well, obviously I don't just do whatever Trump does because I disagree with him all the time. It's Michael Tracy, who's a friend of mine. He's an independent reporter who's been doggedly covering this, and he's pretty thorough. And I don't always agree with him, but if I disagree with him, I have to do a lot of work to figure out why I think he's wrong because he's so thorough. And he's just been publishing nonstop about how so many of the accusers in the Epstein story are just obviously frauds and liars who had been making money off false accusations of powerful people. And he has the receipts for that, and that has shifted my perspective a bit. And I encourage people to, maybe we can have him on, he can explain it to you.
There are actual victims that, that's why Ghislaine Maxwell's even in jail, right? Like there are actual victims. So I think that even by publishing the wrong people, it still diminishes. It's why women don't even speak out. So I think that
okay, but the main victim,
you can find anything to back up your claim, especially given today's time, right? Oh, here's an example of how many people might have convinced others that
the main victim, Virginia Giuffre, recanted her accusation against Alan Dershowitz. And that is, I don't know, if you make a bunch of claims and then you later say, oh, but that one, I was lying about that, or I misremembered that. Doesn't that speak to your credibility?
Well, we'll see.
I think it does.
When Ghislaine Maxwell speaks up, we'll speak her credibility. John Leguizamo is going after ex-Superman Dean Cain. We'll tell you why next. We'll be right back after this. Actor John Leguizamo is mocking Dean Cain for joining Immigration's Customs Enforcement. The ex-Superman took to social media early August announcing he's becoming an ICE agent because he wants to, quote, help save America.
Leguizamo slammed Cain in an Instagram post. Take a look.
What kind of loser volunteers to be an ICE officer? What a moron. Dean Cain, your pronouns are has been.
Others on the left joined the pile-on. Last week, tonight's John Oliver took a swipe, saying Cain doesn't need to mask up because there's zero chance he'll be recognized. Comedian Margaret Cho, Democratic Congressman Mark Pocan, and Jared Moskowitz also mocked him. But Cain is brushing off the haters. Here he is last night on Piers Morgan. Let's watch.
You can make the cheap jibes, and it's funny. And Bill Maher did it, and a few, a couple of our congressmen did it too. But the fact that I'm being pilloried or attacked for joining up with a federal law enforcement agency is insane.
Well, I think the 90s Superman getting into ICE is random because also the age requirement for most other people that are not actors that want to do this for a political stunt, he'd be too old to join ICE, right? They usually, I believe, don't quote me, around 37 is the age. So
I think ICE has said all are welcome now.
Yeah, now because him. They said, oh, well, we welcome him, we made an exception.
I mean, like,
I just am like, no, this is a joke. This is a joke. Like, you don't like when actors jump in on the, let's say, SAG Awards or whatever award shows happen, the Grammys, and give a political speech. So join ICE and just be quiet. Don't make an announcement. Like, you're not saving America. Nothing that you do, Dean Cain, is going to really change the lives of people who are crossing the border illegally. Like, just stop. Like, please.
He's mostly a conservative personality now rather than a, I know he was
90s Superman.
A long time. He does a lot of appearances in conservative media. That's what he's known for. I guess my take might surprise you here. I actually don't really love when celebrity people do law enforcement-esque stunts. Who was the other guy who used to do that all the time?
I didn't know this was a thing
He's
that
like
happened.
Who was the sheriff?
Shaquille O'Neal?
Shaquille O'Neal did it. And there's that weird guy who's got the ponytail. I can't think of his name right now.
I didn't know this was a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing. No, I don't know. I can't think of his name. It makes me upset it doesn't make me upset. I don't care that much, but it seems weird. It's for optics. I don't know. I don't like ride-alongs for law enforcement of famous people. It just seems like a stunt to me. So he can do it if he wants. I think John Leguizamo and whoever are calling more attention to it, which is what it is designed to do. And obviously, I don't think working in law enforcement is bad or is something to be disparaged. We need people working in law enforcement. I'm happy to have more people working in law enforcement in DC, for instance. So it's not. I'm not like think that he's a fascist or something because he's doing it, but it's not.
He's certainly welcome to do it. I don't have any feeling about him
military.
actually doing the job, but I think it's almost like you said, me jumping in there and saying, "Oh, I'm going to join ICE or join the DC Police Task Force."
Lindsey?
As all this trial and tribulations are happening all over DC. Like, my services are not necessary here, right? There's ICE officers. They've been effectively doing the plan that Trump had laid out for them to do, even going further than most Americans are comfortable with. So Dean Cain jumping into this and saying he wants to actually help, it's very performative. I didn't realize that he was a conservative commentator that does the rounds so often in this way.
Yeah.
And so now it feels even more like a stunt to get attention and to raise his profile of somebody who actually is
it succeeded because liberals gave him exactly what he wanted.
and I have an issue with this. This is the Sydney Sweeney thing, and now this. Yeah. They jump into the conversations that they're baited into, even if they didn't care that much. And so that is the thing that I think that everyone should work on, and just tamper yourself and say, this is not really interesting to me.
Successfully baited hook, line, and sinker.
Because this is ridiculous. So you're never going to see this guy do anything effective.
And now you'll see it on conservative television. They'll say, Dean Cain being canceled by those liberal woke skulls who hate our dear law enforcement officers, and but they gave him the other piece of the puzzle by doing that.
I mean, but nobody's really super happy or proud or excited about this. I don't really, you're seeing a lot of praise, like, oh, this is beautiful. Like, even you just said, So I think the most feeling that you're getting out of everyday Americans are like,
stunt to me.
Cool, good for you.
That much.
Right, it feels very stunty. So I think, just like people are tired of the phony clutching the pearls from the Democrats, people are tired of the performative acts like being a fake police officer, ICE officer from Dean Cain.
Yeah, and also conservatives are about only, able-bodied people should be serving in the military, for instance, right? The whole not wanting to make the standards less so that you could have more women or more whoever. So
he was a DEI hire.
With that,
Dean Cain was a DEI hire.
I'm not saying maybe he's in good shape. Maybe he can do all the requirements of the position. That does it for us on Rising Live. Thanks for watching, and look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're now available anywhere you can find podcasts. See you later.